Okay, let's unpack this. You've set us a fantastic challenge, really, diving into, what, nearly 9 millennia of history, culture, religion, and chemistry, all for just one subject wine.
It's a massive scope, absolutely. But what's so fascinating is that the story of wine is, well, it's really the story of humanity itself. We've put together a sort of knowledge map, pulling from academic sources, archaeology, modern science, everything, really.
And our mission is to basically open this ancient amphora right here, right now. We're going to trace that whole journey from, an accidental birth in a forgotten jar all the way to the complex chemical profiles we look at today.
And when we talk about that earliest timeline, we're talking confirmed remnants that go back to somewhere between 7,000 and 5,000 years before the Common Era.
So BCE, just to be clear for everyone listening.
Exactly, BCE. And that antiquity, it's all anchored by some incredible archaeological work. I mean, people like Patrick McGovern have spent their lives on this.
So let's start there. The very beginning, the cradle of viniculture. Where does the source material say the first proven winemaking happened?
Well, the current scientific consensus points pretty squarely to the Shulavari-Shomu culture in modern-day Georgia, around 6,000 BCE.
And this isn't just a story or a myth. This is hard science.
Oh, yeah, it's chemical proof. Researchers analyzed these old pottery jars and found strong residue of tartaric acid, which is, the definitive biomarker for grapes.
Tartaric acid, the ultimate chemical calling card. But Georgia wasn't the only place this was happening, was it? It seems like it sort of popped up along a whole geographical belt.
That's a great point. Georgia's is the earliest proven site, but the sources identify two other major centers that show up pretty soon after. And together, they kind of define what scholars call the homeland of wine.
And what are those other centers?
So first you have Iran in the Zagros Mountains at a site called Göbekli Tepe. That's around 5,400 BCE. Then, a bit later, you've got Eastern Anatolia, around 4,000 to 3,000 BCE.
So if you draw a line, Caucasus, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, that's the spot.
That's the arch. That is the foundation of the entire global wine industry right there.
It even shows up in the language, right? I saw the sources mention the Hittite word for wine was wayana.
Wayana, yeah. And it gives you a sense that by 4,000 BCE, this wasn't some strange imported luxury. It was already baked into the lexicon of civilization.
Which raises the big question, how did they even figure this out in the first place? With no understanding of microbiology or anything.
Well, that brings us to the happy accident theory. And the science behind it is it's beautifully simple. It's all about coincidence.
Okay, break it down for us.
The theory is basically this. You gather some wild grapes, you leave them in a basket or a jar. They get crushed under their own weight, release their sugary juice, and then the natural yeast that's just floating in the air, Saccharomyces cerevisiae, it lands in the juice and starts to eat the sugar.
And the byproduct is alcohol. So the yeast does all the work, and we just stumble upon the result.
We just stumble upon it. It's an observed process, not an invented one. Now, there is another more anecdotal theory.
The bear theory.
The bear theory. The idea that early humans saw bears getting, let's say, tipsy from eating fermented fruit and thought, hey, let's try that.
I like that one. But regardless of how it happened, the timing of the discovery is what's really critical here.
Yes. The synthesis is that alcohol fermentation was discovered simultaneously with the rise of civilization. This wasn't a luxury that came later. It was part of the foundation.
That structural role leads perfectly into our next section then. Wine as a civilization builder. So beyond just a drink, what functions did it serve?
The sources are really clear on this. Across the ancient world, it was never just a drink. It was a tradable currency, it was an early form of medicine, a crucial religious tool, and maybe most importantly, a clear social status indicator.
Let's look at Egypt. You find these sealed wine jars in the pharaoh's tombs. It's obviously tied to power, the afterlife, the divine.
And it was consecrated to the goddess Hathor. That link continues right into Greece, where wine becomes central to the Dionysus cult. But the social aspect there is what I find fascinating.
You mean the thing about drinking it straight?
Exactly. The sources are emphatic that drinking wine without adding water was considered barbaric. It was the mark of an uncivilized person.
Why, though? Was it just about getting too drunk too fast?
It was about control. For the Greeks, civilization meant moderation, order, intellectual control. Undiluted wine led to chaos. So by diluting it, they were literally controlling its power, extending the ritual and asserting their cultural superiority.
That's a pretty powerful statement to make just by adding some water. And then the Romans take that culture and, well, they just amplify it.
They put it on an industrial scale. The Romans were the great distributors. They spread viticulture across Europe. but they also systematized the experience. They created the first proto-sommeliers, cellar masters called the vinarius, who would manage the inventory.
So the first professional quality control in food and wine?
Pretty much. And when the Roman Empire fell, that knowledge wasn't lost. It was basically safeguarded and then perfected by the monks in the Middle Ages.
Right, the monks. They were the key intellectual and agricultural force, weren't they?
Absolutely. They mapped out the best growing sites, what we now call a clos or a cru. They created so many of the great vineyards we still know today, especially in France. They essentially turned winemaking into a precise, recorded science.
That standardization is the perfect bridge, because we need to pivot from that long history to the measurable chemistry of today. How do we even quantify quality now?
Okay, and this is where it gets really compelling. The single most important concept in modern wine science is terroir.
We hear that word all the time, but it's more than just soil and climate, right? How should we really define it?
You have to look at it as a complete environmental fingerprint. It's the soil composition, yes, the climate, sun, rain, the altitude. But you also have to add the human factor, the local traditions of cultivation, and even the unique microbial life in that specific vineyard.
So the same grape grown just 10 miles away could be completely different.
Completely. And that's before it even gets to the winery. Then you have the production methods.
Steel versus oak.
Exactly. Fermenting in a clean steel tank gives you crisp, fruity wines. But if you age it in an oak barrel, the wood introduces these amazing compounds that create vanilla, caramel, even smoky aromas.
Which brings us to the highest level of analysis. Sommeliers talk about the nose and the palate, but the real science is in the chemical aromatic compounds.
This is where we go from history to pure biochemistry. We need to talk about what those compounds actually do.
Okay, let's break down the key players.
First, you have esters. They're responsible for most of the fruity and floral smells. The green apple in a white wine, the black cherry in a red. That's esters at work. Then you have tannins.
The stuff that makes your mouth feel dry with a young red wine.
That's them. They're polyphenols from the grape skins and seeds. And they provide the structural backbone that allows a wine to age for decades.
And we can't forget the original proof.
Of course. Tartaric acid. Still absolutely essential. It provides the freshness, the balance, the stability. It's amazing to think the same molecule that proved wine's existence in 6000 BCE is still fundamental to its quality today. And finally, you have all the other phenolic compounds, which dictate the wine's color and its antioxidant power.
Wow. That journey from one trace of acid to analyzing hundreds of compounds is, well, it's the story of chemistry itself. But now we have to get into the most complex part of this whole topic, health.
The health paradox.
Yeah.
And the sources are extremely cautious here. They make it very clear that any potential benefits only happen under conditions of low and moderate consumption.
Let's detail those positive findings first. What does the science support?
Okay, so the main one is heart health. Red wine has resveratrol, a key polyphenol. Studies from places like Harvard suggest that in controlled doses, it has a mild vasodilating effect. It helps blood vessels relax.
And it interacts with cellular pathways too, doesn't it? Not just thinning the blood.
That's right. And then there was that 2019 study in the American Journal of Gastroenterology that found moderate red wine consumption correlated with a higher diversity of good bacteria in your gut.
So you've got potential heart benefits, antioxidant effects, and better gut flora. That sounds like a pretty compelling argument.
It does. And that is the paradox.
Yeah.
Because we have to bring in the critical counterbalance that all the sources stress.
Yeah.
The alcohol itself is a powerful toxin.
Meaning any benefits from the grape compounds are fighting against the harm from the alcohol.
Exactly. Excessive consumption just wipes out any perceived benefits and become actively harmful. It increases risks for all sorts of chronic diseases.
And there's an unambiguous anchor point for this whole debate, isn't there?
There is. The World Health Organization's position is crystal clear. There is no safe dose of alcohol. It's a complex, contradictory picture, and that's the real health paradox.
Okay, so now that we've covered the chemistry and the consequences, let's just zoom out for a second and appreciate the sheer diversity that's come from those first few grapevines.
It's astonishing. Globally, there are over 10,000 recorded grape varieties. But commercially, we only really use about 1,300 of them.
So we're only scratching the surface. And when you add in all the different techniques and classifications,
the complexity just explodes. You start with red, white, rosé, but then you get into sparkling, liqueur, ice wine, and when you factor in all the regional rules, the total number of technical classifications is over 600.
It's just a universe of culture and science in one subject. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what does it all mean? What if that happy accident never happened?
The sources really force you to consider the macro implication here. Wine isn't just a beverage. It was a profound civilization builder. If it never existed, human history would have. Well, it would have bent in another direction.
How so? What would be different?
You'd probably see slower urbanization. Wine was one of the first reliable, high-value commodities that really pushed long-distance trade. Religious rituals across the Mediterranean would look totally different. And, the agricultural mapping and economic stability that the medieval monks provided would have been drastically altered.
And science itself would be behind. Early medicine, chemistry.
Precisely. Early medicine used wine as an antiseptic, a solvent. The entire field of fermentation science, chromatography, so much of it has its roots in just trying to understand this ancient liquid.
So the wine glass is really a liquid culture library. The connection between that tartaric acid on a pot from 6000 BCE and the complex lab analysis of today. It shows how one simple fermentation has driven religion, trade, farming, and chemistry for millennia.
It's a profound thought. Every glass contains echoes of all that history.
So the next time you encounter a wine, maybe consider which of those 9 millennia of human discovery you're actually tasting. And if you want to go even deeper, the sources recommend authoritative works like Patrick McGovern's Ancient Wine and, of course, the definitive Oxford Companion to Wine.